Right, fiscal Hulatinia, Anseville Doshach, Gaelic translation is available at today's meeting. Please ensure that you have your headphones on if you require translation services. Yeah, there we are. Fiscal ma agus farte have go comedy call agus bunstructure a ha gael out you throw Jauber show agus throw Microsoft Teams. Dennoch cínneach go bhfuil na microphone acah agus mustáisiigh sin éidir sin I an cháirliche calamach go leabhain ar tréir chu le fachcail úrnaí agus a chuneú neis go chláir a chuid. Calam. Nach blet chalam. An na dang die stuúdig na conú chuint na lennes na ar cuine, ma ha sé na bailtin chomedy agus a fialach tra computer facah ur camera éid agus ur microphone Ma ha officin a frialach tra computer facah an dachút mar réilse a bíon die ask nó a fikust kist. Chuin an gine buil agus officin go bhfuil system féh san deomar. Has mach ag an gariche in na max. A maic a chiad dunne a féh a beis goáine agus bí an gáir uaine nan stad. An óid a likas an gariche a stoi maic áirichi an maic go dearach, cha bhí ach dáhhaicid ag an a gaimsa bhí. Ma ha sé bhar son tiile go cist facah ur maic éid agus ma ha officin a blion die ask, cháirlichin eileh an ruta dhéanú. Het piavachas a horst de bhil a chomedy. A huf claríon ús fé mi buil an deomar ácal nó ciach a chuid in an cheall. Céinige go bhfuil a chuneú go chláirich agus an deoigh na coniú dhear I lárach lín na cáir.
Let's meet was the same. Half them speaking in Gaelic, you don't understand a word they're saying.
Sorry? It's not working.
Just will it IT know?
So go me am severe yma. Well, I carry on in English.
It's the maximum level. Headphone, yeah. Units are going off. IT will need to reset.
Right.
Need to reset the system probably from connection. This has happened before.
So
They had to.
it's the 19th.
could have been the daisy chain, so the.
Don't go too far, Katie. Don't go too far.
She's just going to reset.
We'll have to see.
Okay, Carol. Right, tik sy'n ffeirias fyr y dysgwyd mi. Cwsbyr y dill i gael am y diafar ac didig na cwniw, agos mystach y sien hyd iri i'r lwch comparst a hwlyg an offeged imachi agos bwyl a hwniw agam. Ha fasgrif y ga i cwsbyr a hoch i a chorach am y diafar. Bwchor gynt bechgach i an aros cyn san olas agos irin eis bwyl de cára agus cistinn a bhí moch ar go bhfuil na hain am fascíomh go ga an na diabar. Mu stéit sin go na piachúsparin é a chláir opruch bhfuilm aide na bail a harann go choláhas na hasise an seachcin cétain ag tiisiúin sa bhatain agus bhí na céirí is gach bail a bhí an láid. Bhí Robbie Drummond stúdich i réanach Carl Macator secha taispannig agus bí chom ag bwyl cistinn a chuéis. Chan ag gyrtúla gwn go bí mór an cistinn a go gwyw. Agus bhí lá a seo go yw ma hefgin. Id coláwrs dydd gleich gengri agus safrtioch rad a chwmal ag didig na cwnio seo. Gwyd sy'n nos an dest gos ydych ger chwndis yn kiet ger chwndis na cwnio eis Dal mun wa fichet gaan ook vias. Maar zijn er zo'n undige. Zo kundige. Kusperega keer hundes kunju haitans e gerola en jaran. Er zijn er zo'n visriger. Dres kusper keer hundes kunju haitans e la fichet gen jiplen. Er zijn er zo'n visriger. Goedje. Gerfer gerhundes kunju haitans gerala fichet jen nog vias agus a shen er son fisruchu. Kistek tin is a bi. Alan, a kistek it sir.
Yes, Chair. It's just to do. I'll plead my own ignorance over the subject I'm going to ask you about. It's to do with High Trans. It's called the Highlands and Islands Transport Partnership. And I've read through the 3 minutes there. I don't know if I've read them thoroughly enough even to ask this question, but I'll still ask it. It seems to me that this is a group from a wide range of people. It's almost like the same as we had with the Northern Alliance this morning in education. Is what are we getting? What is the purpose of High Trans? Because as I read through this, I see that they're concerned about the emissions from cars or reducing it to 10 kilometers or whatever. But I don't see much to do with the problems that we are all involved in with to do with ferries. Maybe I've missed it in these 3 minutes. I don't know, is that the subject that the High Trans takes? But is it part of the discussions within High Trans? And if so, have they got any power at all, the Scottish Government, to change anything?
Wel, mae'r eisa gwstoch o mysio Rwy'n charig i yw'r High Trans yn eist chalam agos. Ni mi sa'r llun diolch gybi asiac yn sydd ni a fawt yn a hic corein me yw'n. Harwyd yn High Trans mae'r reil achal is dat môr a nhw iacyn y mae'r efelu siwl as y siog o Malex kent zo'n trein lich yn srwt yn mwysynach ach ydy fi ffilm ar gynnu hwf na corein y facyn me yw'n lwch iwl mae'r eisiau pled. Agos ag dydig o la is dat de dulli te se vi aken ich gaidit siwl etter loch pneumatics de borst ugu kerle corlen geeltig agus a corlen geeltig naf harst de High Trans maar a archivus a geel spoot agus aartige morsynnig agus ha ruten ein ha gema film of ha die corlichen asne skiden chen hydrants i vi tar univåer. Maar de mira ha misschien den weekendje gebi groot in de lui pluip ashik en kaharit. Agus de hichte van Sophia Waute aan de hydrants. Agus van meer konju gaan de karrichen ik een hartie piece of ik alapin als je ik een herken juist. We zijn veel meer kutig. Agus eisem go be minister in lá go fiún chuna cúún a sénach agus sé chom is a go vi bíon die fiúin an ski in éle agus fiochan dín dulítas na hacken chu in joors. So a mis spuchan go bhfuil fiú mar a mi féin tóir taiike ofike an ag haitrans Vector Travels ru mar sénne puteach. So chanin cinné bu an fiúmar an ach mar a cholle rodéle noor din heen, sim heen, kaharit, feme, jen roeien, als je nog kalm. Zijn listen wel dat ik kalm na David bij het dol honne kunjun, je kalm.
Nothing greatly more to add to what you're saying. I mean, these are useful forums that we have. We can share delivery problems or challenges with other neighbouring authorities with what they're doing, say on bus transport, or if they're looking at, I think the launch of a autonomous bus.
Yeah.
And in Inverness in the next month. So it's good to keep track of what advances are happening within the whole world of transport. And when it comes down to a local level as well, they can help assist. Say communities are looking at doing community pathways, things like that. They can come in and offer assistance with that. So it is useful for us as officers to meet with other officers across the piece and with these Hydrans colleagues.
Thanks. I don't doubt your own enthusiasm, Chair, for the ferries issues and such like. But I was just reading through these, and I'm new to the TNI board as well, committee, I should say. And but I just see that there seems to be an absence of, I'm sorry to say this, but meaty stuff to do as regards the problems that we are facing as island communities. And I would have expected these to be right at the fore of it. Although you may be discussing them, then what impact that has, and then I'm sure if you say that it's got some impact, then we'll be looking with keener interest.
Hij is me schijnt die me kindje gewild toilet is aan net. Is ik ten is beerla. En ja, blef. Gusper koik, klare goed, maar ik boeil aan de gusperse weer, klaar op behoorlijk zijn klare. We gaan veel maar een nieuwe boeil en over de wel hier te klare gusper. Hier in dit boeil zijn jammer zijn het jaren onderuit de levi akur microfoon nou het teams levi a klech en boekten toch al live. Dan of kinderen geweldig Enamach a díist ranchúsper imachi agus go bhfuil siad a lenten an gleachcha mar a cha a bhíine chu thair. Bhfuil duine clár a gúis? Níl, trí bheith. Bhis is na neist go cúsper a sia sin rianach dhéanatas dá bhíle ga líchet rá a hún. A nach go tá fisracha go dheorst agus órstas agus dianatas le planna gráchas se leh agus spunstreachtar an rá a hún. Bríní calamach cynneach is an láis agus ficrí é cist san bhí.
Thank you, Chair. I won't go into a lot of detail in the report. I'm happy to take any questions on it. In terms of business plan actions, some of them are behind for various reasons, but there's nothing business critical there that's been affected. Maybe take a wee moment to discuss finance aspects. So you'll see the Q1 finance figures here in paragraph 8.1 to the report. The only thing I would highlight is really to do with the project delivery recharges, which are under recovering at the present time. But hopefully that will be balanced by the year end. I would say though that although this year we're quite confident that we can balance budgets, that there'll be significant challenges for 23-24 on what we've seen so far in terms of budgets. Material costs are increasing, construction costs are increasing, energy costs are increasing. It's affecting the whole of our society. So these are things to be aware of for future years budgeting. We've got the winter seminar following on from here, so encourage you to participate. It's not us all talking at you at what we do. It's really to get that interaction so that we all understand the challenges of winter maintenance. The Levelling Up Fund application within for transportation. So there was a £50 million bid put in for that. I think it's going to be October, November before we hear back. And the money that we got from Scottish Government for bridge refurbishment, that's progressing well. We're currently working on design for Lochanup and Barra before we start looking then at the design works for the North Ford crossings. So I'll leave it there, members, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Geistig Dennis B. Ronald, Councillor Fraser.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I can refer the Director to 11.3 in performance management, where there is discussed consideration of options for property rationalisation. I wonder, Chair, could the Director provide any details to the committee as to what is meant by the term rationalisation in practice? And also, could the Director inform the committee what percentage of Collier staff have returned to their desks here in the Collier's main building in Sandwick Road and separately across other Collier buildings in these islands?
Okay, the meaning of rationalisation, as we see it, is that we can reduce the number of buildings we need for certain reasons. So, say if we have 10 buildings that we're using for occupying our staff for just office purposes, then is there a way that we can get more people into less buildings? So by rationalisation, we're looking at how we can reduce our building footprint and hence energy footprint and running costs. But again, the other aspect that will come into that is, do we need that building in that location as well? So it's not just a black and white. We have to look at the impact on the community as well and on service provision. So rationalisation, as I see it, is making our buildings work harder for us so we can look at making cost savings in what we're putting out in our buildings. Does that answer that aspect of your question, councillors?
It does slightly. Just could you provide more detail? Would rationalisation also potentially impact the Sandwick Road building in Stornoway?
I think in that term, if we're looking at this building here, it's more about if we can make it work harder for ourselves, create space so we can actually accommodate other public sector partners in here, as we have done with HIE and as we have done with Social Security Scotland. So we're looking at expanding that process as well, where if we can use less footprint ourselves, then we can get some income for it.
Second part.
So the second part of your question,
Staff.
It's been varying. We've seen a few more people coming in latterly. I would say we're sitting about between 30% and potentially 50% of staff being in the offices on a relatively full-time basis. A lot of staff are making use of the flexibility of home working still and working, say, 2 days a week in the office, 3 days a week at home. So it's very much been left to services at this current time to work out what works best for them. It's something we're keeping a very close eye on at corporate management team, where we want to give more guidance really on what services should be looking and planning for. But in another way, we're waiting for services to actually work out themselves what works best for them. There's obviously some services where they need to be office-based. Other services maybe work more in communities and localities. So there is a bit of flexibility with that. Does that answer that part of your question, or is it something further you want to elaborate on?
It does slightly. I'd be keen to know, what is your own opinion? What do you see as being ideal percentage-wise of staff returning to their desks in Sandwich Road, in your opinion?
In my opinion, there are a number of services that I have direct control over, and it varies even within these teams. One of the teams has just about 100% of their staff back in. Other teams are working with between 50 and 75% of the staff on a flexible basis. And for me, it's working out what works best for these teams. First of all, it's the service provision that has to take priority, but then we take the needs or desires of the staff into consideration as well. One thing that we're keen to keep an eye on coming into this winter is whether staff are going to return more into premises because of the cost of energy at home. It may be that you will see more staff coming in for that reason, but then balanced against the distance they have to travel. So it is something that we are looking at giving more direction on. And at the corporate management team, I know that the chief executive has been looking for a report from myself and from Norma Skinner as well, to actually give that direction on I suppose the formalities of home or flexible working, and a bit of guidance to services as to what we would like to see their presence within the offices be like.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Director, for that. No more questions.
News Moyes then.
Thank you, Chair. Just in reference to financial performance at 8.1, Mr. Mackenzie, the roads budget is the one that stands out at 1.9, and we only spent 289. I would have thought we would have been higher given the condition of our roads at the moment, or are we just holding back, hoping that the problems on the roads will disappear and we don't have to spend the money? Or is this the norm at this time, part of the budget process? Because I know that the outturn is expected to be on budget, but looking around, driving around the roads, some of our roads are in desperate, you'll agree, in desperate need of repair. And I would have thought we'd be spending some money of that money just now. And then if the levelling up fund does come in October, November, and use some of that money again to fall short. But the way it's looking at the moment here is that we're actually in a good position. We're saving quite a bit of money, expecting just to be on budget at the outturn. That's my first question. And my second one is relating to street lighting. I take it that's under property and infrastructure. I don't see any budget here for repair to street lights. And I live in an area where, in Ballaland, where the first street lights I think went in, we're having a lot of problems at the moment with these the old yellow bulbs fusing. Now the cost to repair these is getting extensive, and I think we should be moving to LED to save. It's going to save you as a department money long term. Is there anything going to be budgeted to change these old bulbs to LED? Because I think given a few months' time, you're not going to be able to get replacement bulbs anyway. So should we be building something into the budget for LED lighting, not just for the Ballaland area, but across the whole of the Cole area that has these old lights in? And my third point I was going to raise was following on from Councillor Fraser about staffing coming back into the offices. I'm seeing Mr. Campbell from the waste section here. I would just like to commend Mr. Campbell and his team for the work, the valuable work that they have done right through COVID, right up to the present date. They haven't missed a run of collection of bins, and that's credit to his staff, to himself and his team. Where we see other staff where we've got difficulty getting to, I know it's not to do with this department, I've raised it with the chief executive before, where people are actually having difficulty contacting officers within the department when they can't get through to them on the telephone. I've seen that and I've witnessed that myself. I was trying to get a response for a constituent recently. And to be quite frank, if I was a member of the public, I would have been absolutely, I don't know what I would have done. The response was horrendous. I can speak out with this committee to you about it, but that shouldn't be happening. I know it's been happening to quite a lot of people out in the community. I know it's out with this committee, but it was touched on earlier on. I'm just following on. So a wee bit there to work on.
Right, Callum.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Morrison. The roads budget, yes, we do hold back just now, and most of the roads deterioration actually happens in the winter months. But that doesn't really actively or accurately reflect spend just now, because there is a bit of recharge that still needs to come in. But usually the first 3 months of the year are quite light. You will see that rising and hitting nearer what the budget will be. We are careful with that budget, knowing what effect winter can have on us. When it comes to road condition, that'll be part of the seminar later on, but we'll touch on road condition. We generally do patching at this time of the year, and we've had quite a bit of success from a new bit of equipment that we have for undertaking some shallow patching. The road condition, a lot of the ones that you're talking about probably are starting to need an overlay rather than patching, but we just don't have any capital money for the rest of this year, and it'll depend what the next capital budget brings for us. We can't depend on levelling up fund to fall back on. We've put in a £50 million bid for levelling up. A lot of that is to do with either the dualling of the spinal route or tourism infrastructure, active travel. There is not a lot, well, there's nothing in there for maintenance. Before I go on to the other points, street lighting, is there anything else on roads you want me to touch on? Well, I'll just carry on, and you can go back. So on street lighting, yes, we are having problems getting replacement lamps for areas like that, like you've mentioned. It was we submitted to the last committee a draft annual status and options report, which goes into that level of detail. The budget does sit under the roads budget for streetlight maintenance. I forget the numbers just now, but I think we were looking at something in the region of £4 million maintenance backlog on street lighting, if we needed to replace everything that needs to, everything that's coming to end of life. What we are doing is we are replacing the heads as we need to with an LED alternative. The difficulty we have, we can't go in and do whole stretches of them just because of the cost. We're finding that the saving on maintenance is worth getting, but there is very little saving on energy costs, which you would think would work the other way around because they use less energy. But the way that we've been charged for energy has actually negated any saving we've had on energy consumption, say in the Stornoway area. There's less of a saving as well in rural areas because the lights go off at 11 and then they're back on again at dawn. Your difficulties contacting staff. It's not the first time I've heard that, and I'm hoping that discussions that we have with our own section is working towards making sure that you can get hold of people when you need to. If it's a wider problem, I'm happy to speak to you afterwards and then look at specifics and then see what we can do through customer services or through these teams to make sure that when people are phoning in, they get directed in the right manner or get the right service. And it's very important for us as officers that we can respond to the public when they're looking for us. Problems don't go away if you're uncontactable. So it is something that I'm keen to learn a wee bit more from you, Councillor Morrison, and if there's anything we can do to improve that, and we can do, be that using the IT technology that we have in making sure that people are transferring calls to the right place as well. And when they're on leave, making sure there's adequate messages for who to contact as alternatives. So again, happy to follow up that in a bit more detail with you. Because
Yeah, thank you. If I could just come back on a couple of the points, and thank you for that, Mr. Clarification, Mr. Mackenzie. The streetlights, first of all, how do we determine when it comes into a safety aspect, when we're putting the odd LED light in amongst these old yellow lights? Because I think when people are driving through them, there's blind spots then, they're creating blind spots when driving along. Has that been assessed in the as they've been replaced? Because I've noticed there's just been maybe one or two lights replaced, and then we left the old ones in for one or two, and then we're back to. There's quite a difference. There's actually 3 different lights, and I'm just taking the one village, my own village, for example. It's right across the island, it's replicated throughout the island. But there are 3 different light heads and bulbs now in a short space of road, and it is making driving very difficult for people. That's that's on the lighting one. On the roads one, I think I would like to see be a bit more proactive in getting repairs done and possibly use it, because it does look bad from a budget point of view when you look and you only spent that kind of money at the moment, and you've just admitted you are holding back money from doing repairs. Whereas if we were doing the repairs and then we were finding that we were overspent, we'd have more of a case to get more money into the budget, into our budget line. And finally, going back on the staffing issue, I mean, I won't go over too much on this one, but on one occasion I was put through to a mobile phone in Uist when I was phoning an office in Stornoway. And it wasn't a professional reply I got. It wasn't like a council reply. And if the public, members of the public were getting that, it's a pure reflection on the authority.
it's very difficult when it comes to street lighting. You either don't replace what's going out, or you replace it with the most suitable alternative. What's there is better than having nothing there. It'd be impractical for us to say if one light goes out in a stretch, right, we've got to replace them all with LED. It's not practical. We don't have the money to do that. I think if you're looking at specifics, then there are areas across the place where I know we've got that scenario where you've got different kind of lighting in place. We'll try to minimize any issue from that, but it's a practicality that we just can't do anything different. On the roads budget, we've always been prudent with that, and I couldn't advocate overspending the budget. That is the money that we've been allocated for roads. We know that over the winter there are going to be further problems, which is why we do hold back a bit. But we are reasonably proactive out there and dealing with potholes. But the difficulty we have is that some of these are not just pothole repairs anymore. The roads are starting to break up. We have no capital money this year. We had no capital money for the last 2 years for overlay. So it's something to be considered for the next capital programme when it's been said as well, how much we need to invest in our roads infrastructure. And yes, happy to talk further on the customer services side of things for you.
Right, go on, Ian McGalloway.
Thanks, Chair. Am I on? Yeah. Thanks, Chair. Just come back to Ranald's point and your discussion there on the use of the buildings, etc. I mean, obviously, I feel personally be nothing better than having all the staff back in the building, but as it is, it looks like we have to get used to a lot of them doing homeworking, and maybe using the offices, like you say, two or 3 days a week. And if that proves nothing at all, if it proves that the flexibility of the staff and probably strikes me mostly is there now a need for dedicated workspaces or desks within this building or within any building for that matter? If this is the way we're going to continue and people have proved they can work from home using laptops or whatever, should we whilst, like you say, making the most of the space on the buildings? Should we be looking into hot desking much more seriously? Maybe you have already, and apologies if you've already mentioned it, I missed it. But should this be something that we're seriously looking at? As that would surely save a lot of space, and just wonder what your thoughts are on that. Thanks.
The short answer to that is yes, definitely. It is something that we're looking at, and each team and service work in different ways. So the difficulty is saying one rule fits all. But you're right. There are services just now that are working with half the space that they need, and they're managing fine. A lot of people are working from home quite well. As opposed to the main interaction there is how contactable are they? And using Teams and appointments, people generally are. But if we can get more people hot desking, just not coming in and saying, okay, this is my space, my desk, my pencils on my desk, that kind of situation, we can get to the scenario then that we can free up more space. And by freeing up that space, we can get more people in as well to share the costs of the building, which is the main principle going ahead. So in short, yes, and it's been looked at.
And you'll make a good story.
Just sent somebody again. Sweden to come in online. It's a night should be okay.
Okay, like me leis gáirliche dulmach suain tin stay rásta gáil.
Couple of tíoch son tokaleth point ga Janne me jen gotulich se ha gamel en grema je doch go broch wandelich dus schönakums viachen die grema je dunje son kuschen kochiantje Roger ach chai bringen in bal ich ga over samstro leetje down dus later hangen gegaan is na kra.
Sin rá sin dulid is an mór ac yn diw.
Oh, can you they can't hear me in the back room, can they?
A tolid i gyleog na gael gatwyn dyn.
If they me bring in the bill of a ha.
A dy gobe ys.
Bring me on the bill of my hand rast, no, they need me.
O, ie mi kid.
Oh, had the gra, homie text, had gamach loinch and have a look at Kjarskil,
Just to say, Chair, if members in the middle row, they don't have access to translation at the moment till we get the mics back online.
Stay there, Kitty. Stay there. Right to all, son gyda hos I siwr I gymryd tiach na chw.
Okay, they were me I va natuurlijk het is een akem se gamen een kujok grema aan je teun ja shape as jay bring ri kujiken harve samus gro reported et larach ling no corle so ha mishet ground route na klare gen hach kun je gai ga gwolde me kale dash is gaat de hachel kan haast ha me nog eens knopper ja ach vind me je graag toy u aan zag verder staan routen vissen goed gaan nog hol maar je natuurlijk dat zijn ergens hebben je nog eens niet route kunnen maken.
Yes, we do have systems online for being able to report false street lighting faults, roads faults, and these come through customer services system and then straight onto our roads system. So they do get picked up. It doesn't mean to say that we can satisfy all the requests that come in. Again, it's very much budget dependent on what we actually can do with the roads, but all these inquiries do get seen to and should get answered as well.
Mit olikal gorlich mchdale styr hot the call my utus me.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to follow up on previous questions with regards buildings and take up the Balavanik office. There was those plans in the past to get it rented out to outside bodies, one of them being High-Al. I think that's fallen by the wayside now, and we got any alternatives lined up, and what is the return rate to work for the Balavanik office?
I would say the Balavanik office, it's not as well occupied as this office is just now. The last time I was down, certainly there was very few people working out of it. With getting alternatives for sharing the space, it's been a bit of a moving target, to tell you the truth. Ourselves, and other organisations, are still finding their feet after the pandemic as to how to use their office space and how their services are being delivered. A lot of them have continued with home working, or if they've found alternative means, or they've returned back to their own offices. So I find it very difficult to get people to commit to office sharing on specific bases. One of the things we're looking at just now for you is just looking to see if we can develop more flexible work hubs. So the likes of using the building at Cholasborough and down in Dalborough and setting that up as a flexible work hub, but also doing the same kind of work, hot desking where possible in the Balavanik office, and creating a space that we can actually get other people in to share with us. HIE have decided to purchase their building and go their own way in Lenaclate. But there's other discussions that we're having there as well with other partners as to how best we can work together. And these are developing as we're speaking. But part of the project we are looking at just now is to start to develop some of these work hubs in a small scale, and then to see how that suits, say, NHS partners, where you've got peripatetic workers who can just drop in, use a desk, use the facilities, then carry on their way. So that's developing as we speak.
Tálaiste. Daniel, which is always we
With you, Tálaiste.
sé go chala mar Rostein is they.
Thanks, Chair. First of all, let me think I endorse exactly what I'm sure we all do, what Councillor Morrison said about Ian Norma Campbell, but there were that can be multiplied in many departments that we go to. Personally, I go to IT quite often, and Katie and her department are excellent. And also, there's a man here who's I'm always on his back for potholes, Murdo McCritchie, and in difficult times they're doing very well. I'll be quite honest with you. And a road structure, in comparison to many in the islands, in our nation, actually, is you're doing a good job and in difficult times. There's just one or two questions regarding some of the things that come up in the report here, Mr. Mackenzie. And first of all, it's 6.2. You mentioned there about IT solutions, and the end, the last sentence in that paragraph. Flexible working IT solutions are in place. However, there has not yet been any formal plans or strategy for IT to work towards. Now, if we talk about working towards flexible working, and there's a statement like this in here, it seems to pull out that if we have no formal plans or strategy for IT to work towards, where are we? That's my first question. Maybe I'll ask you to answer that one first, because then I'll confuse you with maybe the next one or two, if I'm allowed, that is, by the chair.
Right.
I'm seeing him looking at me, and I'm just wondering if he's going to allow me.
Wel lic mi leir, da.
Thank you. Okay. When we're talking about the IT strategy, we're really looking at how services want to work. So do we kit everybody out with a laptop if they're going to be working from home and then coming back into the office? Do we set them up as actual PCs on desks which can be available at home and a hot desk in the office? Or do we set up virtual PCs? So these are the things that we need a bit more intelligence as to what services need to allow them to operate. So if we take members, for example, you all have a laptop now. You know, we did go from the iPad now to this laptop, which is more functional. It's got the touchpad, touch screen like that the iPad had. So we took that strategic decision that this would be the equipment that would suit you better. We need to do that for each of the services, and that's what I'm talking about. There's no overall strategy saying that everybody is going to have a laptop. So
Yeah, you would need therefore to know who's working from home and who's not working from home. So
yes.
I would take it that that must be a priority to the council to actually determine what the first question from Ronald Fraser was, who's actually going to be working here? Or are we going to have departments here which are like the Marie Celeste often when you walk into them? So that would, I would say that would preempt your the IT.
That's correct.
Yeah,
that's
thanks.
correct.
The second one is in 6.5, which has a crossover to 11.19. You mentioned there a revised corporate structure is in the process of implementation. Are you able to enlarge on that structure, or is it? And the other one, because the other one comes back to 11.19, which mentions that a restructuring review. If I'm picking it up correct. But first of all, there's a revised corporate structure at 6.5, and then at 11.19, I see there's a restructuring exercises for all sections from the property. I'm sorry, but it doesn't seem to tie up.
Okay.
Does it? Or revised structure or in place. Anyway, if you can explain it to me, maybe I'm making it too complicated.
There's the corporate restructuring, which you're probably aware of.
Yeah.
That's not yet been fully implemented in terms of property and infrastructure and integration of other services into that. So it's in light of that a further review of structures will take place within property and infrastructure. So there's been significant movement with the corporate restructuring, focusing on key areas just now. But one of them, now, I'm not too sure how far I can go with this without the chief executive maybe looking at me with a stern. But there's been a decision made on recruiting a strategic director of finance, which will mean that my previous line management, which would have been through that, won't be through that director anymore. Now that's just recently been decided on. So the next stage would be for the next stage of that corporate restructuring to formalise that for property and infrastructure. And once that's been done, I can move ahead looking at the whole section and reviewing that in line with the corporate structure and indeed with corporate priorities. Because as I alluded to earlier on, finance is going to be a key challenge for us over the coming years. Energy costs are going to be key for us. So I want to make sure that within the section and within the corporate structure, that there are the right people in the right places to be able to deal with these challenges. So I hope that
Yeah,
explains.
I understand. But will there be a time in which the councillors will be able to see the restructuring or where it is at the moment of who we see a sort of diagrammatic line diagram of who is in what department and to whom we is responsible for what? You see, we seem to be in a state of flux at the moment. Am I? You know, you're in a state of revised restructuring, corporate restructuring on, and yet you're going to be reviewed and as you would expect it to be done. Yeah.
I can certainly tell you within my own section who to speak to, but Chief Executive can maybe give a more full answer to what you're looking for.
Thank you, Chair. The structure of the Corla is clear and was agreed in April. What all that remains to be determined is, as Mr. Mackenzie's alluded to, is the remit of what I'll call the strategic finance post. Once that is agreed, and once recruitment has taken place to that post, presuming that's successful, that would affect the line management amongst of two posts, including Mr. Mackenzie's. But the structure is currently clear. It is simply that if a director is appointed with a primary responsibility for strategic finance, it wouldn't be right that Mr. Mackenzie's post then reported to that person, because the post is no longer assets, finance and resources, and we would need to adjust accordingly. But that is clear within the current structure. There is a diagram, certainly, which I saw before going on leave, so I'll find out what stage that is at, and we can circulate that to all members.
Táirich in éiste chaáh léibh. Gáirlich im staff seen.
Thanks very much, Chair. I think most points have been raised since I attempted to speak. And it was just asking I think about not the corporate strategy, but corporate view in terms of people returning to work in council buildings. And like when you mentioned about the hubs that you're trying to develop, what if they are successful, what impact that's going to have on existing building like the Balavanik building? You know, obviously the logic will if you manage to get people in separate hubs, so that building will become redundant. And what's the corporate view of that?
I don't think we've come to a corporate view on the specific of the Balavanik office. It's certainly we've got to look at the whole estate in the mix of looking at accommodation. I think all I can say just now, I think is that'll develop as the organisations, our own and other organisations' views on office working becomes clearer. And I do think there is going to be a bit of a shift over this winter. But and again, I don't want to try to predict it. But you might actually see that a lot more people may return to the office as a workspace. We also have to bear in mind as well how services are located. So where best can they deliver their services from? And the council has such a wide range of services that we need to bear that in mind with whatever we do. So sorry, it's a bit of a non-committal answer to you, but I think the most honest thing I could say is I don't really know just now, but that is developing as part of our plan, looking at the whole estate.
I think the concern, even in terms of people returning to work, if we don't have a corporate view, or if we don't have a general decision to say how we're going to move forward, it's just going to be left to ad hoc decision on local. So we will reach a point where it's going to be an imbalance somewhere, because obviously some people will use their individual needs and individual requirement, but that might not be what the service need.
Well, I know Chief Executive is going to come in on that just now, but I think it does. It's got to be focused on service need.
Thank you, Chair. Just to be clear, we are not in a policy vacuum at present. The current policy was approved through the Corla, through Human Resources Subcommittee and Policy and Resources Committee, but it was rightly an interim policy. But what it said was heads of service would take a view as to who required to be in the office, who could be permitted to work from home if they wished, and we would review the position at the end of the summer, which is now, taking into account the position with COVID. We approved that policy late last year, if I remember rightly. Also to see how services had delivered on whatever arrangements they'd approved or not. And that's why it's particularly important if your constituents are not getting the service you think you need, you must let heads of service, directors, or even myself know, because if we don't know that, we may presume that things are satisfactory that are not, although I imagine heads of service would or should know that anyway. But having assessed all that over the next couple of months, we will come to, presuming COVID is in abeyance, we will take a policy view, and that will then make it clear what office space is reasonably required, whether in Stornoway, Ballavanig or anywhere. We already had a policy of moving to hubs long before COVID came along, where that was practical, and that was popular, that was consulted on, and that was unanimously agreed in this chamber. So, but if we pursue that in a post-COVID environment with some people working from home, yes, that may well have an effect on occupancy of the larger offices, and we'll have to take that into account. Further, one other thing, Chair, we've had a very successful policy, particularly in this office pre-COVID, of accommodating other organisations within the building. That gives us a small income. That, more importantly, that brings about public sector integration. Now, COVID has retarded that, of course. We don't know, other organisations are in the same position. They're thinking about, will they have anybody? If they're a small organisation, is it a room they need rather than a suite of offices? So they're reticent about thinking about moving into other offices too. So all of that has to be weighed up, but it has to be weighed up pretty quickly, and certainly in advance of the budget setting next February, I would suggest. Hope that's helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Cynnych mach Galewen, Gorlich Cynnych mach Galewen.
Hi, it was just a wee quick thing, mainly for new councillors. Would it be possible to have a list written up of what officer does what, or what individual is in charge of, the various bits and bobs within the council? Because it's quite difficult. Well, I find it quite difficult to find who to speak to if a constituent comes with, I don't know, a pothole or bin issues or what have you. Just a list of names. That's all.
Well, yeah, I can certainly give you something for the property and infrastructure section. As Chief Executive was saying, there's a lot of that included within the induction presentation. So if you haven't got a copy of that, I can circulate that to you as well.
Prima. Is de dingen ze beheerlen? Daniel, dag. Boeilijk kundig is een wallig 3 pointje hun. Nou, dag. Whisper Sheikh Ganesh, Rihanna Tiana, dus Raya Hun, Shedavishn Tian, Kanach, Augustin Landig. Maaske door visserige joorstes, Augustiana, dus Liplana Grachisch, Kuschen, Kajersnuchen, en Raya Hun. Ik comment is aan de Shedavishn Carla, ik ernen, Shia puintje 3 diak de Maask. Vini een termet keimel is een Maask, zo August Victi Kisten Sabi. Ian.
Thank you, Chair. There's not really much to add from what's in here already. However, I would like to say that our services have been running considerably well, particularly in relation to what's been happening in recent times. There is reference there to the new rollout of curbside collection services, and that the communication designs are being signed off by Zero Waste Scotland. We've had notification that it's actually been done and they have been signed off. So these will be going to print for getting sent out to all the householders with new instructions for the new rollout of the curbside services. The other thing we have having difficulty with is the lead time and delivery of vehicles. That does unfortunately have an impact on our service delivery, where we've had vehicle orders put in, and just due to what's happening at the moment, with our orders are being delayed by quite considerable periods of time. So that can have impacts on us with the existing fleet breaking down, and we are experiencing particularly long delays in being able to get parts in for some of these vehicles that have been broken. So happy to take any questions.
Kirsten, ek dinge se be. Daniel? Vi var for det vel ikke kommet til så a vel bwyl a gyndig i så vanlig en 3.5. Hoe je te wandelen naar vertrek hier zo. Ben je pleeg.
Thank you.
Nest goes het gepost na Cali en bergjes in de nest is kusbare hoog. Goeie en gynne bwyl bewel na ha am vastgeven gegaan van de diaber. Bergjes in de naast alles ach. Maar haar kisten aan de dia die vastgeven gegaan gaas in aan de diaber. Zo kusbare hoog kan als zo menige oorstle mollen aan een god saveltig pust maar 3 miljoen uit miljoen nech enemichte ek vastgeven gegaan. A parane kniafskrutig we mooi mindige ek vastgeven gehoon zo'n undige ergens ben kan je mooi dan kan er push die janage ergens fikrie kisten se be wil toch goed dat die janage kan niet.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Nothing much to add to it in regards to the report is there for. I'm happy to take any questions if it has to be. Just to say, David Phillips now, from the last meeting of the committees, we agreed David Phillips of Nash Maritime be appointed as the designated person. He did his visits over the summer period, and the report came back there at Appendix 2. The other bit is in terms of the duty holder training, which we're hoping to do in December. But again, the action plan against his report will also be presented in December, and hoping that he will have, as part of his remit, have an opportunity to present that report and take any question from you in December. So happy to take questions.
Kistek dinge se be. Allemaal geleerd niet toen de kist ik maar te je gaan.
And yes, you're right there. Kenny, I don't know if this comes into but it comes under certainly port marine safety. It's to do with harbours. I don't know if it's here, but it's to do with the safety around harbours. I don't know if this comes into this, but it's as well me mentioning it. It's to do with our own harbour down at Breivik. For instance, you know, the cleanup we've had, the place is looking certainly far better than it was. However, I do feel a number of people feel that the amount of creels that are left pose a safety issue to people walking on the thing. So I don't know if this comes under the Port Marine or whether it could become into some other report that we could have on the safety around harbours or whatever. But certainly there were mountains of creels, old creels around that harbour, and there are still, let's put it this way, hillocks of creels around still there. I don't know if you or your colleagues have any jurisdiction in that or whatever can be done.
Yes, absolutely. That is a remit. I think it is actually when you the report that is there, that the designated person has identified that as part of an issue, although we have to recognise that the pier is a twofold, although it is a lot of leisure users that may use it, but it's also commercial fishing port, and they tend to have a lot of gear, and depending on what time of year it is, they might have more prawn gear ashore while they work the west coast with the lobster. So they might have the number of prawn creels is big. It's a bigger number, and it does take up a fair footprint of space. But we have to. I think we need to kind of where we can is accommodated, but accommodated safely. And so I'm happy to go again and visit it. But it is part of something that has been identified. I have discussed it with the peer users, and I think it's something we'll look at kind of dealing with.
Yeah, thanks.
Dennis Beale.
Yeah, just following on from what Councillor McLean was saying, certainly the risk assessment and all the things that have been highlighted by Mr. Nash is as expected, you know, running a commercial fishing harbour, I would say. And there's lots of, as the harbour master rightly said, the seasonality of the fisheries means that there are different types of gear that are on shore at different times. But clearly what is highlighted is fishing gear that's reached its end of use life. And that's very, very important in most, if not all, council facilities. And Kenny didn't manage to have a meeting last week, but a company has relocated to the islands from Durness that has equipment for recycling end of life fishing gear in particular and aquaculture gear. And Pete Middleton and I met with them. They've got the gear. They're looking at, well, not looking, they have relocated to Carloway, the company. They've done a lot of research, global research on the byproducts that can be done. And the biggest concern at the moment is having access to a building that they could locate their gear to. At the moment, they're based, or they're living in Carloway, so they were looking at setting a base in that general area on the west side. I've spoken to folk in the fishing industry that are keen enough to take waste fishing gear to them, and the transportation would be free for them. But if we can promote, you know, recycling of what is, you know, a liability to everyone and can turn it into an asset, I think it would be a significant way forward in making sure that they are a man and wife team, done a lot of research, and she's Irish and he's French. So a young couple moving in, and if there is access to them having some building to rent, I think it would be high priority as a council that we accommodate those kind of businesses to come in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, and thank you to Councillor McInnes for that. I actually was in touch with them this morning, looking to try and set up a meeting with them. I know I missed the original meeting with yourself and Pete Middleton. I was in a oil spill exercise that day, but I have contacted them this morning and see where we can assist them. I think what maybe can you elaborate on the terms of the waste gear, which it has always been a big issue around the harbours, but it becomes our issue, although it is the polluter that is required to get rid of any equipment. Because of the nature of our unmanned facilities, they'll dump their gear on our, but then it becomes our problems. And I think we deal with the enormous quite a lot in trying to get the skips and everything down. But yeah, I'm hoping that we can deal with this couple in terms of, I'm not sure what sort of the scales will be, but I'm hoping that we can do something together in terms of dealing with some of the waste that is produced.
Right, tack och lev för Dennis Beale. Ja. Wy'r bwyl ag gyndych I na molyn ag 3 pwynt hyn. Ja, dag blyf. Dwi'n glwys yn eich cwsbyr yn lwyf, ŵrych eich plan o rianach cwnnwrs twlltyn eisiau gael. A nawr sio dors ffisrch ffeilsych an dar o cwrs de flan o rianach cwnnwrs twlltyn. A na eisiau gael agos y dors twlwg ffisrch I an goord yn eich tedig se klaar yn ama agos mwynich eich giaman tedig se na corla a hw cwnnwrs bo hwlltyn. Agos by'n I colum mach cynnig is yn lausg agos ficri gist sy'n mi. Colum.
Thank you, Chair. The report gives an update of where we are with the cycle 2 of the flood risk management strategy for the Western Isles. The report is looking for approval of the action plan that's appended to the report. And also for you to note that the plan is to be published by the end of December this year. So I think I'm happy to take any questions you have on the action plan. But one thing I would say is that the funding is very limited for this. So even the flood studies that we intend to do, we would have to do that out of the resources that we have on an annual basis. So we have £30,000 revenue just now for doing that work. So we won't be able to deliver everything in that action plan. And the Cycle 1 projects have been delayed because of Scottish Government looking again at the resources they have towards Cycle 1 after being overspent on some projects. So happy to get any questions further on that.
Gist dyn ys y bi. Hier. Lewa. Dim to caffa ki, you know. Roorlijke mag neer.
Thank you, Chair. It concerns me that that's the main purpose of this is to protect assets rather than everything, which I know everything can't be protected, but you know there are people and houses and lives out there that we have to remember as well as assets. Battersea and Eriskay are completely omitted from what I've read here. Can we include them in some way? At least acknowledge that they're there and that they're not forgotten.
The plan went out to consultation.
Yeah.
On the action plan you're seeing here was out for public consultation, and there was that wasn't brought up as part of the consultation. You're right, Councillor McNeil. There are a lot of other things that could be included here, but there was a case of having to prioritise the main areas to look at, and that's why the action plan is as it is just now, based on historical knowledge of the areas, and again after being out to public consultation on what the main issues were.
Well, we've also consulted on other things that communities haven't been listened to as regards, for example, Cooling Island. And, you know, so I will say no more on that. So.
As interesseert ze waren, je gaat je nog even kallen, and we can maybe have it. Yeah. Lewa, weer poeilijk kundig is op alle 2 punten heen. Ja, dag belief. Gashin kusper tegen met die waar ik tegen de konju ergens lichen kloosjes in kusper heen die ik asken haast die heen. Ergens zijn kusper heen die ik asken haast die heen ergens als jou is dan visserig, maar al kistig dingen ze bij. Wanneer? Nee, maar. Gewoon zijn je gewoon nest ergens bergjes in het kusper dik aan de diaver. We gaan dan half ik een emmergie ergens boeilijk om met die voeders in jou, maar ergens hier in je